Hello, this video is going to be a showcase and a build guide for my newest project, which is a gaming console in an Altoids Smalls can. As you can see, this is pretty small, obviously inspired by the mintyPi from Sudomod. But yeah, so this thing, it doesn't have, I forget what the operating system is called, RetroPie. It doesn't have that. So all the games in here are just games that I've coded that are simple enough to fit on a 128 by 64 black and white display. But yeah, this one runs on battery. There's another version that does not. It just has to be plugged in. That one costs a little bit less to make and is a little easier. So yeah, here's the battery thing, and then you can go through all the games. Oops. You pick a game with this button, top left here, and then you can play it. And I think it works pretty well. My only thing that I don't really like about it, here, let me die, is that, oh, and it also records high scores and stuff like that, is that it doesn't stay closed all the way. So, like, you can push it all the way closed, but there's pressure inside, so it stays right here. This is, like, where it idles. But, it's not a really big deal. It'll still comfortably fit in a pocket or a hand. So, yeah, this button right here puts it into low power mode, and then to turn it back on, you hold this down and then press these three. And that's just to make sure it doesn't accidentally turn on when it's closed, because the screen will actually press down on the buttons. There's very limited space. There's only 14 millimeters of height to build this thing. The first kind of layer is the computer and the battery, and then above that is a PCB, and then above that is the buttons, and then the wires from the PCB go from the computer to the screen. It's kind of hard to see here, or impossible, but you'll see it all in the tutorial later. So yeah, there's Snake, here's Breakout. It's a little difficult to play because I'm looking at my phone screen instead of the actual thing, but yeah, there we go. The games play pretty nicely, I think, and all of the files to build this and all of the code will be in a GitHub repository in the description. But yeah, here's the showcase. Oh, and then here, let me die. So this one runs on battery. This one's portable. You can just carry it around with you. There's another version that does not, and it's so pretty much the same thing, except that you have to keep it plugged in. And this one is not USB-C. The other one is USB-C charging. This one isn't. And there's no low power button because you don't need it, but it functions the same way. So yeah, there they are. Now on to the build guide. Here's everything you need to build the project. There's 4 custom prints, 1 custom PCB. Everything else you can just buy. A few 2-pin tactile switch buttons, the display, an Altoids tin, a battery, a special version of the Pico, which has a JSC connector and built-in power regulators, which is really helpful. A little bit of wire, very, very small wire. All the parts will be listed in the description and in the GitHub repo. First, we are gonna take the Pico and load the program onto it. Okay, you're going to want to plug the Pico into your computer, and make sure you hold down this boot button right here, and that should open it on your computer as a folder. You're going to need 2 things to load the program onto the Pico. One is a copy of MicroPython, which I copied and will now paste into here. And the other is Thonny, which is like the IDE that we'll be using. Okay, it's setting up the board. So here I click stop, and now it sees the Raspberry Pi Pico, and we're going to want to create 3 files. So one will be our main.py, one will be our display drivers, and then one will be a text file for the high scores. And all of these files are available on the GitHub. I'm just going to go ahead and put 5 zeros here and save that. And then I have these prepared on my desktop, so I'll just copy them. Okay, now I've copied all of the code that I need. I have main.py, I have display drivers, and I have 5 zeros for the high scores. And that is all that you need to set this up on your PC. So now you can go ahead and take the Pico out and start start messing with it. All right, now I'm going to test the battery and make sure that that's working. And it is. You can see that the white light comes on. It's just good to test this as much as you can as you go, because you don't want to have a broken piece at the end of this. It would be extremely difficult to disassemble. Okay, the next step is going to be to take this, and this all off. We don't want them. We're actually going to solder the battery directly to the board because we don't have enough room otherwise. And the way that I did this is, you can see there's some solder pads like here in between these two, right there. There's a couple here for the JST connector. Basically, I just got those as soldered as I could, and then I just basically ripped these out. And so that you could follow a similar strategy. I am not going to solder on the camera because I'm going to burn myself. But yeah, you're going to want to take this, and this out. This is about what it should look like when you're done. Our next step is going to be to solder these 6 buttons onto the PCB. And when you solder them on, you can see that on this side there's 2 little metal pieces, and on the other side there are not. Make sure that when the board is like this, so that you can read the text, the metal is facing down. See how this is? Like that. And then yeah, you just put the pins through there, solder them on, and make sure to clip off any like remaining solder or pin on the back of the PCB. It needs to be completely flat. My strategy for getting the buttons on is to put a little bit of solder in each hole, and then put the button on top of it with the solder on, and then melt the solder while trying to push the button down into the hole. So after getting a button on, it'll look kind of like this, and then you'll have these, it won't focus, these pins sticking out of the back right here, and you'll want to make sure to clip those off. Make this surface as flat as possible. This is what your board should look like by the end of that. Next, we are going to actually solder the Pico onto this. Now this part can be a little bit tricky because this version of the Pico has a lot of raised stuff on the back of it. So you can't actually just like set it on. What I do is I put some tape. The highest part is right here. So I put some tape there, and I put some tape there, and then I stick it on here, and you basically just want to move it around until you can see through every hole. You want every hole on the PCB and the Pico to be lined up. And then at that point, my strategy for soldering is to take a little bit of solder, and this is kind of hard to do while holding my phone, but basically stick it through both like that, and then kind of use the solder to just like take off that part and that part. And then you've got a pretty solid connection between the two boards. And you don't have to do this through every single GPIO hole. You only have to do it for the ones that are actually doing something, which is 16. So you have to do that 16 times. Yeah, if you want, how should I do this? Oh yeah, and make sure when you're positioning the Pico, you have the directional buttons on the right, then you flip it over, and the Pico is sat so that the USB-C port is facing to the left, like this. This is how you want it to be done. And yeah, you just solder it on there. I'm trying to think of a way to... you know what? When I finish this, I will show you. I will show you which holes you need to solder into. Okay, so I'm actually going to switch up my strategy just a little bit. I think it would be best to first just connect the 4 pins for the display and test the display, and then get the rest of it, just to make sure that everything's working at that point. And the 4 ones for those are this minus here and this plus here, and then 8 and 9 on the other side. Those are the ones for display. And so now, if you have ordered the same display as me, which you had to have basically. That's not focusing. You'll have to take these pins out, and the way that I do it is I kind of jam a box cutter in between the black part and the PCB there, and just kind of like take it out, and then I melt the solder for each pin and pull them out with tweezers. Okay, now the screen or the display should look something like this. The pins are gone, and it's just the metal contacts for you to put the wires. So how we wire this up is on the PCB. These 4 through holes right here connect to these 4 holes exactly like this. So with the screen facing up like this and the board facing up, here, let me get a better angle. So like this hole here on the far left will go to the far left hole here, which is ground. Second to the left will go to VCC, etc. So you just want to connect. You're just going to want to connect the wires from here to there. Plug this in, make sure everything works. Okay, I've soldered the display now, and it works. I've plugged it in, and so now I'm going to leave the display on here for now and continue connecting the Pico to the PCB so that I can test out all the buttons. Alright, at this point I've soldered everything I need to, so I'm testing the buttons, and you can see that, oh crap, it is, first of all, it's very hard to film with one hand and play with another. Maybe this will work. All of the buttons work. The low power works. So we're good. So now I'll show you where the actual soldering points are. If you look in this, you have to solder everywhere where I have metal, with the exception of this one right here to the right of the ground, or the minus. This one I soldered on accident. You do not have to solder that one. That was a mistake, but everything else you do. So there you can see that. And if you want to, I mean, you could also just look at the PCB, and everywhere where, you know, a connection comes out of a through hole, that's where you have to solder on both sides. So that could also work. But yeah, there's that. So now I'm going to trim all of these down. So this thing has to sit pretty flush. There's not a whole lot of room. So I'm trimming every single one of these as flat as I can get them. And same for these ones. Everything has to be very, very flat. Alright, I've gone down and shaved off all of the excess metal, and I went ahead and desoldered the display too. We'll be putting that on later, but since we know it works, you don't really need it right now. And now the next step is going to be getting the battery working. So this is one of the prints. This is where we hold the Pico goes here, and the battery goes here. So if you put the Pico in, you should find that it sits pretty well. So yeah, there we go. The Pico is in place here. And as you can see, there's a little cutout right here. And basically, the battery will go right here. You're going to cut off the JST connector. You're going to cut this part off. Route the wires through a hole in here to here. Cut them off where you need them to be. And then solder the black onto the minus and the red onto the plus. I am not going to be able to film myself doing this, but I will show you what it looks like. So yeah, I mean, you'll cut this part off, and you'll strip it, and you'll route these through. And then once they're through, you cut to how much you need, strip again. I mean, you don't strip the first time, you strip that time. And then you can solder them to their correct places here. I'll show you what that looks like. Here you can see the finished job there. The soldering is kind of awful, but the light is on, so we're fine. And yeah, it just looks like this. The battery just goes right there. And I am actually going to cover this, I'm going to cover this with electrical tape, because the wires are sticking out a little bit too much for my liking, and if they touch the can, they'll probably short. So let me do that. Okay, we've got electrical tape, everything is safe-ish. So now we can move on to The screen. The screen, believe it or not, is too big, and we have to Dremel it in order to get it small enough. So you're going to want a distance of 4 millimeters from the top of the screen to the top of the plastic, and a distance of 1.5 millimeters from the bottom of the screen to the bottom of the plastic here. And I can... It will look something like this. This one broke, but you can see about 4 millimeters here, so you'll be like just at the top of the soldering holes, and then 1.5 millimeters at the bottom. It's very, very, very little amount. And that is how you get it to fit in this thing. And it won't close properly unless you make it this small. The bottom of this will actually catch on the can. So yep, I'm gonna go Dremel it now, and then I will show you the result of that. Here is about how it should look after you're done. Make sure not to damage this part right here when you're dremeling, but yeah, it's something like this. Okay, now we're gonna do the final part before the final assembly, which is the holes for wires in the back and for the USB-C port in the Altoids tin. So first you want to carefully remove the lid. So open it, and then you'll see this kind of hinges right here. You'll want to just bend it back just enough to get the thing out. Maybe even take like a flat object and press on it, because you don't want to mess these up too bad. Okay, with the lid now removed, we have just the bottom part, and what we're going to do is take our whole guide print and just set this inside of it. And this shows us exactly where to drill the holes for the wires right here, and where to drill the hole for the USB-C port right here. And the way that I do it, and I would recommend this, is, well, first of all, I put it in between these wood blocks. I don't own like a vise or anything, so it's hard to stabilize it. And then I take a nail, I put it in each of these holes, and I hit it with a hammer, enough that it leaves a mark so that I can continue using the nail, making an indentation in the back right here, and then I can use that indentation to guide the drill. So I'll show you what one of those might look like. So I get the nail in there, and then, this is kind of difficult. I had to pause it so that I could hold the nail, but yeah, as you can see, I hit the nail with a hammer right there, and it made a little indentation, and you can keep going with the hammer, make that as big as you like, and then you use that to guide the drill. So you'll just drill straight through here on every single hole. So here I've finished drilling the wire holes in the bottom part, and then after drilling them I also used a metal file to kind of clean it up a little bit. So now I'm going to situate it back in the print and do very, very similar thing for the USB-C port. So you're just going to want to use the nail to make some indentations into the tin right here. I would do like 4 of them maybe, drill through those, and then you'll probably definitely need metal files to clean that up. So yeah, I'm going to do that now. At this point I've got the USB-C port all drilled and filed down now, and if I put it back in here, you can see that it fits pretty well. So now we're going to move on to the wire holes in the lid, because the wire has to go in these holes, through holes in the lid to reach the screen. So I'm going to put the lid back onto the container, the tin. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it, oh crap, can't really see that very well. I'm going to put it in between these 2 wood blocks like this, and use the holes I created earlier in the bottom tin as guides to show me where I can put the new holes in the top tin by getting the nail in these holes and then hammering it and then drilling the same way that I did earlier. Okay, at this point I've got all of the holes for the wires in the top lid, and all the holes that I need in the bottom part. And the last thing I want to do is I want to Dremel this part down a little bit, about 1/10 of an inch or 2.5 millimeters, to allow more room for the wires. On the other one I made, you can kind of see this area right here. It doesn't look great on this one, so hopefully I'll do a better job, but like you can see, I just want to take that down a little bit so these wires have a little bit easier time sitting right here. So yep, I'm just going to Dremel it. Alright, I've got my little indentation here, so now we can move on to the final assembly. Okay, let's The next thing we should do is with the screen holder, we're going to want to test it out with the screen as we have it. So you'll see that there's some supports right there. They're not real supports, I just made them in CAD. And you can kind of cut them off because you're not supposed to have these here. So you're going to want to clip those off. Make sure everything looks good. And you may also want to trim up the edges of these parts right here. They can kind of look gnarly because they hang over so much. So I'm going to do that really quickly. Okay, I've cleaned it up a bit and tilted these things up so I can get the screen in. And you're just going to have to like kind of here. I don't want to take the screensaver off until the very end, so I'm going to cut that little piece off. Alright, based on this test fit, the screen seems to fit pretty well. So let's start assembling it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our bottom piece and our electronics piece right here, and I'm going to put each of the wires coming off of this into a hole. You know, I'll do the leftmost in the leftmost hole and the rightmost in the rightmost hole, etc., etc. So I'm gonna do that. Now it's probably as good a time as any as well to check and make sure that our button cover thing works, fits correctly, and it does. So let's start assembling. So I'm just gonna pull. I'm just gonna pull these wires through, and okay, I've got these wires through, and I'm going to get a bit of tape and lay it across the bottom here so that this thing sticks in. Okay, with tape now in there, I'm going to pull these wires through as far as I can. And you kind of have to angle this when you put it in. This is kind of hard to hold. You'll start like this and then push it in that way. Okay, now we are in. And probably the first thing that I would like to do is check this USB port and make sure that it's set up correctly. And it works. Okay. Now I'm going to check this, make sure that this fits on here good. And it does, it fits on pretty well. And now we are going to take our wires and put them through our holes in here, still keeping the same order. Okay, I've pulled all the wires through and I've put the lid back in place. And now I'm going to set our screen, not soldered yet, in here so I can gauge how much wire I need. And so basically I'm just going to pull each of these up and cut them right about here where this top black bar is, because that's where the soldering points are. So let me do that. Okay, so now that I've cut these down to about how long I need them, I'm going to take the screen back out of here and solder the wires onto them. Okay, now the screen is soldered, so I'm going to go ahead and place it back in its holder. And I'm also going to place tape right below here so that the screen actually stays in place. Okay, the tape is in. I'm going to set this into place. Awesome. I'm going to put these down and do a test close. Everything seems to be in order. Couple final things. I'm going to put some tape in between these things right here, the black part of this print and the screen, to like stick it on there, because sometimes those come up. And I'm going to take this back out and actually put tape on it because it's it rattles around just a little bit. Alright, I've gone and bent the hinges, and as you can see, same thing with this one. It will close all the way if you press it, but it likes to sit like in this area. But yeah, everything is fully functional here. So let's go ahead and take the screensaver off. If I can manage, holy crap. Oh, nope, had it for a second. There we go. All right, and turn it back on. And there we go. We have a functioning little gaming system inside of an Altoids Smalls can. Works exactly the same way as the other one. That's terrible. I hope you liked the video. Let's just get a side-by-side shot of these two. The new one, as you can tell, is quite a bit cleaner than the old one. Refine my methods a little bit, but yeah, there you go. Thank you very much for watching. Again, links in the description to all of the parts, and the GitHub repo has some more details and the code and the files you need. But yeah, thank you for watching.